eMeeting. So this is the Ask Me Anything from the Q2 2024 Alliance meeting, just recorded separately from the meeting because we didn't have time to go through everything. And these were the questions that came in, and I'll just kind of go through them one at a time. Now, oh, and I left a typo in. I didn't notice the typo before. I just noticed it now. Fro Windows. Uh, so I didn't really understand why the person was asking about Windows 11, except that, not everyone adopted Windows 11 yet, but we've supported Windows 11 since FileWave 14.8, I want to say. Um, so 100% it supports it. The better question would be what's going to happen with Windows 12? Because once Windows 12 comes out, we're going to have to issue statements about what version you need and all that. Um, but the but as far as managing Windows, well, you can manage them the same as Windows 10. You can image them the same as Windows 10. You should be at least obviously on FileWave 14.8, but really you should always be on the current release or the one before it, because those are the supported versions, so you'd be fine. Um, and the IVS works fine with it. Yeah, um, I don't know. Does anyone else have any other thoughts about this question? Because I think it was just somebody that maybe was on Windows 10 for the most part and is now stepping into Windows 11.
Yeah, I haven't had any, there's really no differences from what I've um seen as far as capturing and sending out the image.
Yeah, and and managing, right? Since 14.8, I know we initially had that bug where you couldn't run PowerShell scripts again, like we had scripting issues with Windows 11 when it first came out, but
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
14.8 I think was the one that fixed that.
Yeah, that's been fixed for a while now.
Yeah. So,
There is something that I could mention since there are a lot of people that have been doing Windows imaging for a while now, and
mhm.
they've been putting when they put the FileWave client on the image to be captured, they're still doing the delayed start for like the duplicate issue that was um, big with version 13. And it's not necessary anymore. I mean, you still can, but you don't have to do it.
Okay. Is that I don't know that there's a KB article about that, is there? Or is that just the habit that like maybe
Yeah, I
when you were
think it's
helping somebody or support was helping somebody?
yeah, that's just a habit of just how we used to do it
Yeah, yeah,
to help with naming and stuff. It's just not necessary anymore. And I don't think anybody ever came out and said it wasn't necessary. It's not hurting anything. It's
yeah,
just an extra step.
yeah, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so then how do you distribute Windows updates to machines with FileWave? Well, for the most part, there's kind of two categories that I think of. There's the ones that we can do, you know, just built in to FileWave Central or anywhere, right? Where you go here, you go to find software updates, you do Windows, requested only will show the ones that your devices are specifically asking for. This will show everything in the catalog. Um, but this is not every update for Windows. There are updates for Windows that Microsoft distributes where you get a installer file. And so maybe first I'll show how you do it in here. So I actually have an update that one of my machines says it needs, right? I had already done the step of importing it. So I'll show when an update starts its life, you can hit, I'll pick, this is small. You pick create file set. In this case, it lets me pick a language and then it kind of brings it in. And there's a little progress bar down here and it's doing a whole thing where it's uploading it to the server and making it available. And then you can use this box over here to say, this is my device. There's a couple of things, right? I can approve the update, and I could technically associate it to all, and that would make it so I don't have to associate it. Imagine there's like 50 machines in here or 10,000 machines in here. Um, you could do that. I think, nope, if I do that, I don't reset it. So then if I had not associated it to all, the way that a lot of people do it, I think, and Andrew Deba, you correct me, is that if you do this checkbox instead, so if I approved it and then I automatically deploy it to requesting clients, then anybody that asks for it would get it in this case. And they would get it
Yes.
with whatever default reboot behavior there is. So you want to look at the file set, right?
Hmm.
So in Anywhere, if I go and log in, okay. So if I go and log in, I could go to software updates and I could go to Microsoft and you'll see a list. You could think of that like that Find Update Assistant a little bit, except that this shows even things that cannot be deployed directly from FileWave. So we report on a lot of stuff, and even in Central, if I bring it up again, if I bring up a client, I bring up this guy, software updates, we report on a whole lot. Not everything here can be automatically packaged and deployed, right? It's the was it? It's the critical security updates, I think, is the limitation. So not drivers and not things like definition updates, but we report on it so you could see if it's there, and you could certainly package it up yourself. And the so you'll see both of those kinds of things. And if I was to pick, I'll just pick this guy, and you'll see like I might think that this should be able to, but the ones that we can't really send in here are, you'll see this automatic installation not available. Um, I find it personally easier to identify things that FileWave can package up to just use the find software updates, because here you're going to see the things, everything here we can package up in the device details, and here you see everything. Do you guys have a way that you know of to filter this list so that or is there a field you look for to know that FileWave could push it out? Or do you do what I do and go to
Well,
the assistant?
let me.
Are you speaking on Windows
Yeah.
or
For Windows.
Mac?
For Mac, it's easier because technically everything listed we handle.
I thought that there used to be a sort up there by the search list.
Yeah, and I myself, I've never really had luck with identifying like the thing. Like I always thought critical was, that, if it's critical and a security update, that this would be a perfect one to be one, but this one
Yeah.
specifically was not.
Um,
But
The
maybe it's
yeah,
automatic
critical
column,
update.
though.
but I guess what I would do without this sort list, because I'm not sure why it's not there, is I would sort by unassigned, just by the sheer amount. Like I would do the one that has the most amount of devices that need it.
Because these
Like mine, when I did
clearly
that,
these
ends up
clearly
like
would be deployable,
at
right?
like
Because they're,
10,000.
oh no, you would think clearly could be, well, I can check it, but it doesn't have the buttons to assign it. So so
Well, that one's like I think that one's a driver
it
of
is,
some kind.
but it listed unassigned with a number. So I just I don't know that here's like the most intuitive place to figure out,
Yeah, so
there's a field I don't know of.
yeah, so if the update's not going to be like in the Microsoft update catalog, you won't be able to push it out through here like that
Right.
one, but like the security updates and stuff, you should be able to.
It should be. I just know that there's some that don't. Like if I pick security update here, It's not available. But I just know in Central, I guess it's the thing of software updates. This view is not really the same as, this view. It's more like this view when you're looking at a client. So it's just a little thing I noticed that it would be super if one day we added like a deployable, yes, no, and I just
Yeah.
don't think we do. Um, but you could definitely tell as it's deploying, you can tell the status, like aside from that. And in fact, like the thing you mentioned about downloading, um, if I was to download this and assign it to somebody, not use the automatic packaging of it, and install it, it would record that it was installed, because it would show as installed. And there is an article about Microsoft. Is it WUA? No. Microsoft updates automatic. I should have bookmarked this, but there is, I'm just going to go here and go actually to Shells, Microsoft software updates, because I know there's not necessarily a ton. Installing updates that are not automatically packaged. So this article tells you if you fetch the MSU, that's what it is. If you fetch the MSU, you can put it in a file set super easy, and then deploy that. So, but if you did package this and deploy it, you would have to target the machines that you want to send it to, which you probably could do from inventory. I know I can make queries about people missing patches. I'd have to think about that. Do you guys ever do these?
Majority, I think, ones I worked with, basically it's just whatever they needed requesting for the,
They realized they needed a patch and
yep.
they did that specific one. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
I mean it's super simple because I mean ultimately it's just running this command in the script. It's very easy. And it's a simple file set. Um, so that's the option for updates that can't be automatically packaged up. So, okay. So aside from that, so I would say in general, you're probably going to that Find Software Updates wizard. You're looking for new patches that have come out. And the other thing is on Patch Tuesday, when Microsoft releases their updates, it's not immediately in FileWave, but it's not because of FileWave that it's not immediately in FileWave. Yeah, Microsoft always has like a 2-day delay on updating the offline cab. We use the offline cab, and so you won't see it immediately necessarily. Um, and that can be a reason why. And then also your server checks for updates. I think it's every 24 hours. So if Microsoft updated the cab just now, but your machine checked for the updates an hour ago, then tomorrow they would show up. And there is a command line to make it show faster if needed. So that would be Windows updates. Um, and then the improvements made to macOS updates without using third-party tools such as Nudge. During the Alliance meeting, we talked about how OS updates are changing. And if I go to, I know it has the word evolution. Um, so there's an article about this, and I'll copy and paste it into the chat for Sean. Um, so the gist is in the Apple world, the thing to think about is it's this bottom part, and 15.4 is going to come out in a few weeks, and the change that you'll see is that for Mac OS updates, you won't see anything lower than Mac OS Sonoma. But for iOS and iPad OS and Apple TV, you will see updates below that. And because they're using GDMF, I guess, you're not going to have the issue of seeing the misnamed things. In the past, you might see like two iPad OS version whatever, and they're named a little different, like iPads OS, and then one's called iPad OS, and it was a little bit messy looking. It was just the way that we were pulling the updates from Apple. So a couple of the changes are in preferences. You'll see that the macOS updates, it's gone from here. So it's just a UI change that you'll see because we don't need that catalog that we were using before. And when you go to find software updates, you'll notice that there is, in a second, was that because I opened that quick? Maybe I'm going to test if that's a UI bug. Well, that is interesting. I'm running a beta of 15.4, and I'm going to quit the admin real quick and relaunch it. Because you should see Mac OS, but you won't see the MDM anymore because that's gone. And you will see iOS and you'll see Apple TV. And then if I can make this work, I'll try and break it later. Oh, no, I've broken myself. Well, imagine that you see Mac OS and that you see iOS, and that you see Apple TV, and you can see why this is a beta. So you will only see Sonoma updates, but for like an iPad, you will see older updates. Otherwise, the UI looks the same. And the MDM choice is gone because we're not pushing updates through that Apple mechanism. And so this improvement is to address that issue with updates. We know Apple updates were very broken in the past. Updates through MDM were always supposed to be the way to go. They never really worked consistently. But now with declarative management, we think they do. So at least that's our hope. And so really the only kind of gotcha I think is if you're on Mac OS lower than Sonoma, how to get to Sonoma, and you could do that with tools like with Nudge and Superman probably. So that will be a big change in 15.4.
And speaking of the Mac OS updates, in my knowledge, is going to be a couple years off in terms of using FileWave to push Apple updates. Is one reason why our organization, while we moved away from using FileWave, there was two reasons why we moved away from using FileWave and moved to Superman. Is one was the broken nature of Apple's software update binary, and y'all were just as affected as everybody else on that. So there was that. But there was also the nature of notifications, which in FileWave had a good notification system, though at least the situation a couple of years ago is that there was a loophole where the user could indefinitely postpone it. There was no enforcement mechanism. Has that changed?
Yeah, well, so for file sets in general, when you would, I'll just pick this because it has the checkboxes. So for any kind of file set, that's like an application or a bunch of files, you should see these checkboxes, right? And so I could say that I want to enable this at a certain day and time, and I want to set a reboot deadline of this. And in the past, this date and time would come and go, and they would just keep getting nagged. But if you go to the file set and you go to properties instead of double clicking it like I did, that's where this force reboot will for sure reboot them. But the problem with this for OS updates um, is that this mechanism would mean that whenever they get the update, right? So they get it on Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the update hits, it reboots their machine forcibly. They could have been in the middle of something. And so we still have
Hmm.
that problem. That was why we originally didn't have this checkbox, was nobody could really reconcile with the way that we prompt. How can we make it so that we do force, but we don't cause someone to have data loss? And I think there's some future where if it wasn't 2 minutes, if maybe the reboot deadline was that, you would get nagged, for a period of time that you could define and let them snooze it for a period of a time, that maybe forced reboots could be better. And then the thing with OS updates is if you just assign them to devices, whether they need the update or not, they're still going to reboot at the end of it. Um, so there's more work to be done to make the experience, I'd say, better with forced deadlines and prompting and everything. And I know that we're working on improving the experience for software updates, like um, in general, both OS and third party. 15.4 adds the WinGet stuff for third party on Windows, but for OS updates too, we know that there's room to improve.
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations, the reason why they move to open source, no matter what their MDM, was the fact that trying to improve the notification experience to the end users, yet also retain some type of enforcement, such as using a deadline like X amount of days or X amount of deferrals, similar to what I believe the Windows Update experience has to a certain extent. So,
Yeah,
okay, I'm looking forward to 15.4 then.
yeah, no, it should be good, and it is in QA now. Like they're going through. This was the first test build that they produced. That QA is going through and finding all the bugs. I'm pretty sure I found one bug. So um, this should be good in a few weeks. And in case somebody watches this video and doesn't know about these things, for at least for the Apple side, for Mac OS, Nudge is one of the things that people use to customize the experience, and then there's also Superman, and those are both worth a look at. There's similar ways. There are things you could do on the Windows side if you So just like we had that thing for updates that aren't in our sort of automatically packaged thing, we have a file set that has an example script of installing an update that you've downloaded. Um, if you made your own activation script that did things with notifications, like there's a possibility that, any person could build a fancier experience. That is a bit of work, but also on the Windows side, there's probably a project I'm just not aware of. There's probably something just like Nudge and Superman for Windows that I just haven't seen. And if anybody sees that, I would be happy to know what it is, and then we would put into the KB how to use it with FileWave, because you can do just about anything with FileWave. It's just a matter of thinking about how it integrates. So I think that's the Windows updates one. I think that's and the improvements made to macOS updates. Um, So where Nudge does let you control the experience more, FileWave at least the improvements are that we're going to use declarative. And also, it's important to know, Andrew, was it Nudge that said that they're not going to continue to produce new versions because they think declarative is good?
Yeah, Nudge on their GitHub release page, version 1.1.16,
Yeah.
it is going to be their final Nudge release for macOS 11 and potentially other versions of macOS. So, yep.
So, I mean, they may change course if things don't go well with declarative, but I think everyone
Yeah.
assumes that it
Yep.
will. So, and for older than Sonoma, you probably continue to use that old version of Nudge because the older Mac OS won't really change, so it probably won't break, and Nudge on its current version will be just fine.
Yep. Same thing with Superman as well.
Yeah, it makes sense that they would have faith in the new thing, and Apple's been very positive about it. Um, and declarative should do a lot of things in the future. So, um, okay. So then, will there ever be a Linux client or admin? Um, there are no plans to have a Linux client or admin, although technically they exist in our IVS server for Windows imaging, but not a standalone GUI admin or a full client that you can install somewhere. And it's just because we haven't seen, I guess, the demand that would justify it. But if lots of people need it, if people raise that as a need, then what I would say is go to the knowledge base and go to shelves, customer resources, community, and then go to product management. And when you go to this page, it'll say once you're logged into the KB, you go here. Normally, you can't see the article. It's not open to the public because we just have it so customers can see it. So I'm gonna log in. I'm gonna log in with single sign-on. I'm an employee, so this should work. And then I'm me. And so once I'm me, I can click here, and then I would say not the release portal, because this is all about all the stuff we're doing and things you want to vote on, improvements. This is the big ideas one would be where you'd hit the plus thing, and this is from the last time I was doing this demo, Linux admin, and you'd say like why it's important to you. You'd click on how important it is and put in your email. It sends you a link to verify you're not a bot, and then it gets reviewed. So if there was demand, we certainly do things that have demand. So it could be that we don't know that there's 100 customers that want it. So whether it's a Linux client or admin, just let us know. So that one's simple. Um, and then the correct way to switch out the client upgrade file set after performing an upgrade on a FileWave server. So there's a couple of articles. So then server update. There is, oh, there's this one. Okay, so if you're on premise and you're upgrading, it talks about, like locking the clients and like it takes you step by step through upgrading the server, upgrading your admin, and then there is clients. So if I look here, there is sort of the step by step about grabbing it, but it doesn't. I guess there's not like a video or anything that shows it, but the whole idea is, and I'll go to the download page and show it, so it's in the recording. But it is here, and if you're not on premise, if you're hosted, there's this, and with the last round of upgrades, we included a link to this article to make it easy um, for the hosted folks to know the next steps. And um, so same thing. This just doesn't have upgrading the server. It has that bit ripped out and just focuses on the clients and the admin. So if I was to do this, Let's see, 15.3.1. That's 2.1. We'll go to 3.1. Okay, so when you go in the downloads and you go to, let's say, Mac OS or Windows, some people will be tempted to grab this Windows client one. There's a little note saying not to use it for that. But it's pretty easy to see it and think this is what I should use. But really, it's the upgrade file set that you should use. So if I was to grab this, I get this zip file. I'm going to open the zip file. It opened on my other screen. So I'm going to, well, there's nothing crazy in here. So I have this. This is the file set. I double clicked on it to end up with this. And now I could drag this in, assuming I drag and drops that correctly. There we go. And then it will upload. And you'll see this progress bar, and then there's a lower one. So here you might think it's all done, but you can see down here there's another progress bar. So I could add, this is the Windows one, and I could, grab the Mac OS one. It's the same thing. It'll just be another file set here. Right, and I could bring it in. If I don't drag and drop that right. There we go. And that one has a bunch of files, so it's uploading them. Now in my server, this is a mess. It's not really organized. I would say that it would be good to have things a little more organized. So once this finishes uploading, I'll show you. Now I think I have an exclude from tests. I had been testing with this server a bunch, and I shoved some organizational things into this higher level. I'm gonna actually make a file set group and call that winget. Put those into winget. Brave I know is winget. Gonna make a file set group called Windows OS updates, and I'm not gonna put that at that level. I'm gonna put it at that level. I'm gonna put these guys in here. So you can see it starts to get like a bit more organized, except for this box. Now in my file wave thing here, you can see I have these past clients, so I'll put it here, and I'll put this here. Now the thing to think about is, when you get the new client, you probably want to make sure that you don't have the old one associated, right? So in my case, if I was to show all, show. Oh, maybe I did clear out a lot of my associations I was cleaning up. So you'll want to see, like, do you have an association? In my case, I actually have this deployments. Now, the way that I did it has some negatives. So in my case, I have a lab and everything's a little bit messy, but I might have, let's clean this up real quick. So I don't have a all Mac OS. So I can add a smart group. I can say all Mac OS. And I'm going to add a plus. And I'm going to say Mac OS. And then I'm going to say smart group, all Windows plus OS platform is, and then Windows And I can do this. I could make like a Chromebooks one. I could make like an iPads one. I could make an Android thing. Well, I guess I can't make Chromebooks because Chromebooks live in their own little thing, but otherwise I can make it for the other types of devices. And it'll take it a moment to populate. You can see that populated. So if I was to be neater and I had those, um, I could, instead of doing this, I'm going to get rid of this, and I could say all Mac OS. I could technically do it this way, and I'll point out why this is not spectacular, but I could technically target both, and I could remove these file sets, and then I could do 15.4. I probably don't really want to send these to my devices, but now I have these assigned to these. I don't really want to send it because it's beta, and I don't necessarily want to upgrade my lab. But if this was a release, I could technically do this. But the negative to doing it this way is that my Windows machines will show on file set status. You're going to see that the Mac OS one, you'll see exactly what happened because I've done this before. So if this bothers you, then don't do it that way. Make like a deployment or an association that's just the Mac OS to the Mac update, just the Windows one to all Windows, and then you don't have to see file sets that didn't qualify because the Mac OS update doesn't go to the Windows machine. All right? Was there anything you guys do different, or anything you think I missed about that?
I don't think so.
In regards to the file set upgrades that you're talking about, is it okay to treat it like other file sets in terms of revisions?
Um,
So, or or would it be best just to replace the old one with the new one?
I would just replace the old one with the new one. I would delete the association. In fact, I even usually in production environments would, get rid of these old ones. Now, one reason why you might keep some older ones is, let's say 15.4 doesn't work on Mac OS 10.13, but you have some Mac OS 10.13, then you would use like the latest client updater for those devices that is supported. So you might have multiple client upgraders that are live, because 15.4, covers. I'll show where this is seen. So clients. So like if we're thinking of Mac OS, right? There's these legacy ones for Mac OS versions. Um, so you would need, if you had macOS 10.13, you could only go as high as 14.54. So you'd need that updater as the updater, but just for your macOS 10.13 machines. Which I hope you don't have 10.13. If you do, try to phase it out. Try whatever you can do to phase it out.
Right.
Um,
So,
yeah.
a tangent question to using revision is another way to distribute the file sets is with a dependency. So if you have an empty file set and you put the package or the file set as a dependency within an empty file set, is that considered good practice for a file set upgrade?
Um, so I have 15.4, right? I have this. So I guess what would I gain by doing that? I'm trying to imagine because I'm.
You don't. What you would gain is you don't have to break the association.
Oh,
All you have to do is replace the the
Oh,
item inside the dependency tab.
I mean, there is sort of another way that maybe is um, can be done. So I have a FileWave group, and it's got both things, right? And I could certainly associate this, assuming I got rid of the other stuff that was in here, right? Like, let's say I did FileWave client upgrades, and I'll just put that at the top level. So I could associate, I mean, there's two ways. I could associate this to my all Macs, right, and all Windows. I still have that downside of the Windows machine seeing the Mac one and the and vice versa. But I could also, if I want to, I guess nobody would really see this, right? I could have Mac OS, Windows. I could, I'll just do an association because I can right click and do it. So I could create an association of the Mac OS one to all Mac OS. And so then what happens is when 15.5 comes out, I just drop 15.5 into this group. And then I don't have to mess with the association. Or if I had a deployment that did the same thing, because Mac OS is targeted at all Macs, and the Windows one can similarly be targeted at all Windows, then I never really have to mess with the association. I could just drop in the new one if I want.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. I overlooked that. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, and then you'll see it here pretty clearly as well. Or if you do it with deployments, you know, in this case, this was sort of jumbled all together, but I could make a new deployment called upgrade Windows. And I could target Windows because I said it was Windows, and I could target Windows. And so that's in there. And so that should play out correctly. Um, yeah, that should play out correctly. I could prove it. Well, that's the Windows one. I could prove it by going into file sets. I'll just move the Mac one into Windows. We're just going to pretend for a second. So if I had it like this, imagine instead of it being that there's a Mac OS one, that it's like an old, 15.3.1 for Windows. So that would mean in deployments, if I go to here, you can see both are there. So, but I'll put that back. And I will probably get rid of this. Oh, I'll get rid of actually all these because they're just dummy lab things. And then I will get rid of these because I don't want to upgrade yet. I want to wait till the next test build. So yeah, so that would be upgrading the client and all the things you'd think about. And the client upgrades silently. It restarts it. A couple of quirks we've seen is on the Windows side, there's some cases where the agent might not be happy starting up, like at boot. If you experience that, and what you'll see is you'll go to like services and you can start the client just fine, but you reboot the machine and you'll see like maybe it's not starting automatically. Open a support case for sure if you see that. The other thing was that initially when 15.3.1 came out, the upgrade file set, um, there was some thing where it was checking if the service was running and it could get caught in a loop and not complete. But we replaced the 15.3.1 upgrade file set as soon as we realized that. It was pretty soon after the release that we did it. You wouldn't end up broken in that case. You just wouldn't end up upgraded. You'd notice that your clients weren't really upgrading. But then the new file set takes care of that. Um, Otherwise, things have been pretty good, except for the normal. If you have FileWave admin, particularly on Windows, if you have FileWave admin on Windows and you have the client running, this can really happen with other things like Booster. Um, they share this library, this Qt library. It's Qt, it's our graphical library. And depending on the order that you do the upgrades, my memory is if the what is it? If the admin upgrades first, then it breaks the client, I think. Um, but that was never good. That we had that shared library, and in like the next version or two, we're separating them out, and we're moving to Qt 6, and we're removing that dependency, and so it'll never be an issue again about the what order you upgrade things or what components you run on the same system. So let's see, that's that. And then the last one's pretty easy. And you know this one, Sean, because you're working with us. Uh, is you know that okay. So the plan with CentOS to Debian is that I've sent, a few emails that everybody should have gotten. And if you were to do go.filewave.com/Debian, and you go there, you'll get to some articles. Talks about the CentOS end of life. In particular, this article explains what I'm going to explain. Then there's the server migration. But in end of life for CentOS, if my server is managed by me on CentOS, then I have to do something. If your server is managed by FileWave, there's nothing you have to do. If you want to move to be hosted by us, there'd be nothing you have to do. If it's on Mac OS, then there's nothing you have to do. And for boosters, if they're running on CentOS, well, you have to get them over to Debian, just really replacing them, um, and then enrolling the Debian ones. If it's on Mac OS or Windows, we continue to support that for boosters, nothing to do. For IVS for Windows imaging only ever existed on CentOS. So because CentOS is dead, you have to stand up a Debian replacement. And so there's an action to take. So I put a little gear where there was like an action to take. And this was the KB article that was linked to from the email that I've sent, 2 emails so far about the Debian migration. And there's some questions and answers in here like, will FileWave help me? I don't want to run a FileWave server, so will FileWave help you? So the KB article is, there's over 100 servers that have migrated so far. And most of those were not done with our help. So I think the documentation is pretty good. So most people could probably migrate it themselves, be happy. It'll take a day of work because mostly the file copies. It takes a while to copy the data folder from one instance to another. But aside from the data copy, the rest of the process, I don't know, is maybe like an hour of doing things like actual commands and doing things, probably less than an hour. Um, and if you get stuck, support is there, right? If you do a command and you're like, this isn't working, then open a support case. Since it's a migration, your old server is intact. Even if you completely messed up on the migration, somewhere along the line you didn't copy something or you did some command wrong, the original server is still there that you could bring it online and unlock the clients and be okay until you can come back to try and migrate again. But for most people, it's gone really well. There have been people that have opened up support cases to resolve things. There was one person that had a weird thing that I just couldn't figure out in our chat in Discord. And Andrew had a quick call with them. It turned out that in setting up the network interface, they weren't saving, I think, the config, so it kept reverting to the old network setting. But once they got through that, that was a quick call. That was super easy. So we'll do anything we can to address super easy. For more hand holding and being there the whole day and devoting somebody to the migration, we have that as a paid service through professional services. And if you go to hosted, we do that same service because obviously we have to get the data into our data center and we work with you. But that's the plan generally. And Discord sessions every week on Thursdays um, to answer questions live. So I think that answered that. Sean, think do you think I missed anything?
Not at all. You've explained and answered those questions very well, including the questions that I interspersed among all that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I suppose there's one thing as I'm looking at the text. 15.4, the next release, is the last one that'll run on CentOS. So when 15.4 comes out, you're cool to still be on CentOS. 15.5 comes out, that will be in June, July, probably August, probably beginning of August, because they're quarterly. That will be passed when CentOS is end of life. We're not going to produce another version. So if you were still on 15.4 at that time, that would be the time you'd migrate over and then be able to upgrade once you migrate from 15.4. So you can migrate from 15.2s, 15.3s, and 15.4s from CentOS to Debian. So, or you could decide to run macOS for server. There was one organization that I spoke with that was considering, they wanted to stay on premise, they didn't want to go hosted, but they also had an issue with Debian in their environment, and they didn't have an issue with Macs because they have a lot of Macs. So they were thinking about doing a Mac in their data center and running server on it, which would be just fine too. You can migrate to that. So those are all the things.